What you know, alibis. Welcome to another episode of Pretty Lies and Alibis. I'm Gigi. It's Tuesday, June 10th, and what a big day. Full circle. In this case, we ended the day with Lieutenant Hermosillo from Rexburg on the stand. There is one last state witness, and that is FBI Special Agent Nick Ballance, who will be coming on to testify about Alex's phone pings, probably going to show his route of travel from Idaho to Arizona and back. So I really don't think that's going to take a whole lot of time. And if Lori has any witnesses, they have to be ready to go tomorrow, or we go into jury instruction and then closing. Crazy how quickly this trial has gone. Colby was in attendance today, looking all sharp in a suit and tie, there to support his buddy, Ray Hermosillo. I love the fact that they've become very close because there's so much ugly and tragedy and evil in this case. And these friendships that are a result of meeting each other under the worst circumstances ever, but have developed into beautiful friendships, I think is the beauty that we find in all of this mess. Also in attendance today, Julie Brooks, who was Tammy Daybell's cousin. She is a master cookie maker, y'all. I've never tasted cookies as good, and they were pre-wrapped. So let me read to you the sticker that was on these cookies. While Lori is serving life with her green chili guilt enchiladas, Chad's on death row talking about a storm that hit more like a drizzle. Please enjoy this cookie that tastes like freedom. Love me some Julie. It was so good to see her today. Let's jump into the cross-exam of Detective Pillar. Lori talks about the interview with Brandon in the cruiser being audio recorded and says, at the end, you admonished him not to contact Melanese. The witness explains Brandon tried to contact her to let her know a shooting had occurred, and also the witness wanted to talk to her for obvious reasons, being that she was the closest person to him. Brandon did try to call her and got no answer, and later on, they had Brandon's phone, so he wouldn't have been able to call her. That was his only phone. The witness did make contact with Melanese on the phone, left a voicemail, and she did agree to meet and come in with him the next day on October 3rd at the Gilbert Police Department. Melanese did come to interview voluntarily, and she didn't ask for an attorney. That interview lasted around an hour, and he said it was a little interrupted since their youngest child was in the room. Lori asked, did Melanese advise you about some business deals? Objection. Sustained. Did you investigate anything you learned in the interview or follow up with anything Melanese offered to you in her interview? Yes. Did you talk to her after that interview? The witness said the next time was on October 14th. Melanese contacted him about custodial issues and seeking advice, which Brandon did not return the kids to her when it was her time due to the fact he had almost been killed. Brandon gave you a vehicle identification number from a Jeep at my household. The witness doesn't remember Brandon giving him the VIN number. They got the plate early on in the investigation, and they were able to run that plate and get the VIN from that. Lori asked, where did you get the plate number? And he said, from Chandler, Arizona. They call it the incident. We know it was Charles's murder. And they got that plate from crime scene photos from that Jeep. The witness met with Chandler police on October 9th. And just a note here, that was the day Tammy Daybell was shot at in her driveway. Did you search for a green Jeep with Texas license plates on it? No. He said if that was something they would have pursued, he would have farmed that out to another agency. Did you request financial information regarding Melanese from Brandon? Yes. He gave that information to the witness. There was a second email requesting financials, and Lori said regarding Melanese's financial gain, if something would have happened to Brandon on October 2nd, the witness said he doesn't know for sure, but it's safe to say yes, there was an email. Brandon gave you screenshots that did not have to do with finances on February 20th. Does it give a theory of what could have happened on October 2nd? The witness does not remember that. Lori hands him a document. He still doesn't remember. Lori, what happened with the Tesla window afterwards? The witness said Brandon was able to throw it away after law enforcement concluded their time at the scene and also after taking photos of the windshield. Lori asked why it wasn't preserved, and the witness said they collected what they needed and they had photos. Lori asks if there was a hole in the window. The witness said there was a defect at the top curve of the glass, but nothing that would match a bullet hole. That day, they processed the Tesla at the scene and then took it to the Gilbert Police Department to a secure area indoors. The witness actually drove the car, and Detective McDermott followed with a technician standing by to receive the car. They looked at the bullet hole, but it really didn't take long. They had no intention of impounding his car because it was his only car at the time. He also said that trajectory was not tested. Lori, having been a case agent hundreds of times, you would know the defense may want to test it themselves. The witness said in a case like this, it grew into more. They did not have someone who was deceased. They had property damage, but they were very early in the investigation when that decision was made. Lori, it's not in your protocol to preserve evidence, and the witness said, not in this case. Lori, why wouldn't my team want to test for trajectory? The witness said, well, today maybe you could with updated technology, but they don't have that car today. Brandon sold it a while back. Lori, how would my ballistics expert be able to test the bullet hole to see if a handgun was used or a rifle? The witness said, well, you would hire a specialist and see if they could test it. Lori asked if they could perform their own tests just from photos. No. Lori asked if the projectiles were tested. The witness said he is not a munition expert, but knowing what he knows, the fragments couldn't be determined because the bullet was not intact. There was no shell casing. There was no gun to verify where it came from. They did have markings from the jacket that was consistent with a bullet and bullet fragments. Lori, would it make a difference if it were determined to be a handgun and not a rifle? The witness said no. If they had an intact bullet or shell casing, maybe they would have an answer, but at this point, they don't. Lori, how many neighbors confirmed they heard a gunshot? The witness said approximately 4 or 5. Earlier, you said nobody said the Jeep was gray, but in your report, you said 2 neighbors did. Who were they? The witness doesn't remember who. He knows that the Jeep was gray from looking at the photos from the license plate reader, as well as information from the Chandler PD. And that's pretty much all he knows about the Jeep being referred to as gray. Lori, most of the information you got was from Brandon? He said in the initial investigation, yes. Lori asked if they were on a first-name basis, and he said, that's how I do my investigations. Lori says first-name basis, and he says usually he tries to keep it casual with victims. Lori, did you ask Brandon if he owned firearms? The witness did ask, and Brandon did not. Lori asked if someone cleared the house, and the witness said they did prior to detectives arriving on scene. Lori, Melanie's provided you with information and called back on October 14th. The witness said he listened, and again, it was revolving around child custody. He advised her to contact an attorney who deals with family law. That's not his area of expertise. Lori asked how long that conversation was on October 14th, and the witness said about 10 minutes, and it was over the phone. On redirect, I loved this by Trina K. Did Brandon stop at the time of the shooting and put a little ticky-tacky note where he was shot at saying, I better mark this for later? No. Did he say, I need to document the barrel of the gun so they can do trajectory later? No. Were you surprised that didn't happen? No. Another neighbor saw the Jeep where Brandon did, and it was idle and running with the same Texas plate and the same dark tints on the windows. Yes. She talks about the errors in the transcript from the car. The witness points out the air conditioner was running and Brandon was soft-spoken at times. The witness agrees it would be best to listen to the recording and not rely on that transcription. The prosecutor also points out at 9:13 a.m., that's when you hear that loud bang from a neighbor's camera, and then Brandon called 911 a minute later at 9:14, which matches other witnesses' statements and evidence. She asked, could a handgun kill someone? Yes. What about a rifle? Yes. The Jeep was captured a few times in Idaho on license plate readers, which is consistent with him leaving Idaho on September 30th, as well as other evidence in the case. This is in reference to Lori asking yesterday why they only had that one license plate reader photo from Arizona. The witness was working with the Rexburg police to get information in relation to the attempt on Brandon, and they had to rely heavily on Rexburg for evidence. There was a jury question. Is it unusual for witnesses to confuse colors or not remember them accurately? He says yes. Colors are often mistaken. And then if you add a traumatic incident into the situation or just being frightened, that could explain why people may not be able to identify the exact color of a car. Another jury question: were the attempted calls to the wife recorded while in the police car on the day of the shooting? Yes. The last jury question: were voicemails left explaining the situation? The witness said that was Brandon who called and he just requested a call back. Later, the witness explained he was a detective and wanted to talk to her when he reached out to Melanice. The next witness, Vanessa Melke, she's with Mesa Forensics. They were doing DNA testing for the Gilbert PD. She compared the Jeep samples to the known DNA sample from Alex Cox. On the steering wheel, there was a mixture, a minimum of 3 individuals, and the major contributor was Alex. On the gear shift, there was a mixture of 3 people, male and female, with no major contributor. However, Alex could not be eliminated as a source of the DNA. The driver's side seat buckle was a mixture, but the major contributor was Alex. The next witness, Kyle Mueller from the Phoenix Police Department. He works in forensics and analyzed the gunshot residue that was taken from the Jeep. He explains gunshot residue is a fine metallic dust. It doesn't decay. It will stay indefinitely unless it's washed away or wiped away. The driver's side and the passenger side windows were positive for gunshot residue. Ultimately, the test was positive for the Jeep being in the vicinity of where a weapon was fired or came in contact with something that had gunshot residue on it. On cross, Lori says, "You said the gun may have been discharged in this vehicle. Is that your conclusion?" Yes. She asked, what are other sources of lead? He lists a bunch like fireworks, which is less common, cosmetics. Lori asks about brake dust. He says yes. Fertilizer. He doesn't know. Hairspray, don't know. And the last witness of the day, Lieutenant Ray Hermosillo from the Rexburg PD. He's been with them since 2001. He started off on patrol and stayed there for 18 years until 2019 when he was promoted to detective. He said Rexburg has 40,000 residents and 7 detectives to cover all 40,000. On November 1st, 2019, he was talking to Detective McDermott from the Gilbert PD to look for that Jeep Wrangler with Texas license plates. He was also given the address to the townhomes they knew Lori, Alex, and Melanice were living. He was told units 174 and 175 is where his focus should be, so he got a search warrant, and he went to the townhomes November 1st with other detectives. He was asked to perform intermittent surveillance to look for the Jeep, but did not see it that day. He had been given Lori and Alex's names, and they show some photos of Lori coming in and out of the garage of Unit 175, and she got into a blue Nissan Rogue. He identifies Lori in court for the jury. He did follow Lori to Walgreens in Rexburg and then back to the townhomes. They admit the photos of the garage area. You do see Alex's truck there. You can barely see Lori going inside the door. It was a glare right where she was, but you could make out a silhouette. They looked for that Jeep all weekend, and then on Monday, November 4th, Lieutenant Hermosillo was on his way home from the gym and just happened to look over, and he saw it. He called a tow company to bring it to their impound lot there at the police department. And then he informed the Gilbert Police Department. They did try to contact Lori at the townhome to let her know they had possession of the Jeep, but they could not get anybody to respond, and nobody called to say it was missing. He was present when the search warrant was executed on the Jeep, but he did not assist. He did notice that tinting was extremely dark, and he said darker than Idaho state law allowed. He couldn't see in unless he got right up to the window. And on December 18th, 2019, a second search warrant was executed on the Jeep, which he authored. He was there when the search warrant was being executed. They did find a receipt from Arizona, October 1st, 2019, the day before the shooting. And they bring in photos of the evidence found in this search warrant. There are overall photos of the Jeep inside the facility. They show that Texas tag. They show side views. The spare tire is on. And she asked, "Could you open the window with the spare tire on?" No. There was some chapstick, some receipts, some stickers, a little army man, the green army man, which made me sad because I just thought maybe it was JJ's. That receipt was for October 1st at 1:12 p.m. at a taco place in Mesa, Arizona. Later on in November, he did surveillance at the townhomes. This was on November 26th. He had contact with Chad, who at that point he knew was Lori's current husband. Alex was also there. Alex and Chad got out of Alex's pickup truck, and Lieutenant Hermosillo saw them unloading that pickup and placing items into the garage of apartment 175. They bring in aerial photos of the townhomes, and he shows where Unit 175 is, and he also points out where the Jeep was found. He knew that Alex, Lori, and Melanie's were all living in the townhomes with Lori and Melanie's side by side. He points out documentation showed Lori as the renter of Alex's unit, but he never saw her there. She lived in 175. Alex was listed as the renter of 175 where Lori was staying. They bring in the rental application, and you see Tylee and JJ are listed on there as other residents, and the Jeep was listed as one of the cars, as well as that Nissan Rogue. Alex was the emergency contact for Lori listed on that. They bring in Alex's lease agreement that was signed August 26, 2019, and then they bring in a letter from a rental company saying Alex is on the lease for 175 and not Lori. On November 26, when he tried to make contact, he initially went to Unit 107 to look for Lori, but nobody was there. He went to 174, which was Melanie's apartment, and then 175, but no contact was made with anybody. The next day, November 27th, they execute search warrants on all three units. But at this point, everybody had already left. Alex's unit was completely vacant, nothing in the entire apartment. Lieutenant Hermosillo said it looked ready to be moved in for a new tenant. 175, which was where Lori was staying, there was furniture, food in the pantry, there were beds. It looked like somebody was living there, but upstairs, the closet was empty with nothing left but hangers. He said it looked to him like somebody grabbed their stuff and took off with what they had. They bring in a few photos from inside Lori's townhouse, and that's where they found that rental contract for the storage unit that was located in Lori's master bedroom. So they bring in photos, and you see the front of the townhouse with JJ's toys still on the porch. The contract for the rental unit, she used the name Lori Ryan. That was on October 1st, 2019. That storage unit, by the way, was only about a half a mile away from the townhomes. Inside Lori's townhouse, they found women's clothing in the garage. And he said the garage had boxes and plastic containers, boxes of clothes, prepper barrels for water storage. He found paperwork in the garage for Alex. They show Alex's passport on screen, bills, credit cards, tax paperwork, and just general mail. There were bins of belongings of Alex's, as well as male clothing and furniture. They also found several weapons in the garage, and they bring in photos of these weapons. They show a couple of rifle bags and then the rifles removed. On the rifles, he saw threaded barrels where you could screw a silencer or a suppressor on. Also, on one of the rifles, there was duct tape for makeshift padding for the butt of the gun. There was a separate photo shown of the scope, boxes of ammunition, extra rifle barrel parts, and then just a lot more rifle photos. There were barrels that could be changed out with the stock. Then they bring in the video from the storage unit. This was what I call the aha moment for this jury. Now, granted, I've only seen them yesterday and today. I told you guys yesterday, to me, they were very stoic, but super attentive. When this video came in, by the time they are shown Lori and Chad, and then Lori and Alex taking in and removing that Jeep tire and that back seat, everybody seemed to be writing notes. You see people the light bulb goes off. And it really was a great way to include Lori in the conspiracy, hands down. I'm not sure that I have seen a couple. We see Lori going in to rent the unit initially. We see at 2:23, Lori walks in and finds the unit, opens the door from the bottom, and on that day, she is alone. The back of her car is open. On October 2nd, Lori comes back. This is the day of the shooting. That's when she came with Chad. They show video from the outside and the inside of Lori and Chad bringing that back seat and that tire into the storage shed. Then you see Chad shut the door and they leave. They point out just those two items were brought in that day. The next day, October 3rd, the day after the shooting, at 1:10 p.m., the Rogue pulls back in. They park by the building. Lori and Alex go inside at 1:12. Alex carries out the back seat of the Jeep and then the tire. Lori closes the door. They show the outside view of Alex bringing the items out and putting those into the Rogue. And they point out that the back seat and the tire were in the storage unit for only about 24 hours. Lieutenant Hermosillo said they also contacted local firing ranges to see if Alex had gone shooting, and he had. September 3rd, he went to the gun range and they showed the sign-in sheet. He signed in as Alex Cox. September 25th, 2019, that's when he bought that burner phone at Walmart. And Lieutenant Hermosillo points out they went to an Idaho Falls location, even though Rexburg has a Walmart and it's not any smaller than the one in Idaho Falls. And Idaho Falls is about 25 miles south of Rexburg. They showed the receipt for the burner phone. It was $91 and he paid in cash. The prosecutor brings up this could be a way to avoid being traced, and Lieutenant Hermosillo agrees. On September 27th and the 28th, Alex goes back to the shooting range. He signs in as C. Quint, which is kind of like his license plate, except it's not CP Quint. Like on the license plate, he left the P off when signing in. In December of 2019, they got a search warrant for Alex's phone. Lieutenant Hermosillo said this device was found with Alex's personal belongings, and it was still signed into that Homer J. Maximus Gmail account. The records were given to FBI analyst Nick Ballance for GPS searches, maps that were around the time of the attempt on Brandon. Lieutenant Hermosillo was tasked with going through the records from the Google account. Google searches made on the burner phone by Alex. So, September 23rd, he searched for places to shoot near Rexburg, tent shop, Idaho Falls, auto tent near me, and the same day he reached out to the tenting business. Also on the 23rd, he YouTubed how to load your own ammo and he viewed a video. September 24th, he visited Best Projectile for Long Range with 300 Winchester magazine and visited a site related to that. September 27th, he searched for minute of angle, a ballistic trajectory calculator, and he also went to the gun range that day. September 28th, there were searches for ammunition and calculators, that trajectory calculator, and 556 bullet drop at 500 yards. September 30th, he searched for the weather in Phoenix, Arizona. October 1st, 1:12 p.m., he looked up the address to that taco place. 7:52 p.m., there was a search for Brandon's address, and he also got directions. The day of the shooting, there were multiple searches for the address that day, and also he pulled up directions. After the shooting, he looked up locations in Arizona up to Idaho Falls for alternate routes, including Arizona Farm Road, Holbrook, Arizona, and then at 3:22 p.m., he looked for Moab, Utah. Later that day at 8:46 p.m., he searched man shot in Gilbert, Arizona, and news, Brandon Boudreaux. He searched for directions to Fillmore, Utah, and then Idaho Falls Airport. And they end the day the best way they could. In addition to these videos, the Gmail search warrant results for Lori, the Lolly Time Forever account that was started in August of 2019. And if you remember, she gave Alex that new email address. In August, she was searching about things related to their move to Rexburg. September 19th, Walgreens in Rexburg. September 27th, movies in Idaho Falls. September 30th, just a few days before the shooting, 5:14 p.m. How to get the backseat out of my Jeep. And then Jeep Wrangler, JK, rear seat removal DIY. And she watched a YouTube video on that. Lieutenant Hermosillo notes that when she was with Chad, it looked to be she brought in a back seat to a Jeep. And later, she was with Alex when that was removed. She also searched on the day of the shooting at 8:13 p.m. Gilbert, Arizona News and Gilbert, Arizona News breaking news local headlines, and she visited one of those sites. The next day at 1:15 p.m., Lori and Alex take that back seat and tire out of the Jeep and put it into her Nissan Rogue. The state was finished with direct, and Lori had no cross for Lieutenant Hermosillo, which floored me. I said on the YouTube short that I did, it looked like she was writing a novel, so I thought, this cross exam is going to last until the actual second coming of Christ, but no questions whatsoever. So again, tomorrow, FBI analyst Nick Ballance on the stand to testify about phone pings. If you're not subscribed on YouTube, go subscribe. I do a morning, midday, and then after court update where I keep you posted on things. And again, tomorrow night, I'll do a recap of the day's testimony in an hour or less. All right, that's it for today. Hope you guys have a good rest of your evening. We will see you soon.